6 hours. That's all that stood between Seo Junwoo and a wedding he didn't want, to a woman he didn't love, until he saw her. His ex. The one he searched every continent for. Standing in a hotel lobby with 3 little boys clinging to her hands. And when the smallest one looked up, ran straight at him, and screamed one word. Dad. The CEO's entire empire, his wedding, his carefully built lie of a life, cracked down the middle. He had a tuxedo waiting upstairs, and a bride who didn't love him either. He had 6 hours left to become another man's replacement in his own life. Then a child's voice cut through the lobby noise, small, certain, aimed directly at him, and Seo Junwoo realized the woman he never stopped loving had been raising his secret for 3 years. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not today. Not 6 hours before his wedding. Not with 3 boys who had his exact eyes. Linda saw him first and she wanted to run. But her youngest son was already sprinting across the marble floor, arms wide, screaming a word that would end an engagement before it ever reached the altar. Every guest was already seated. The priest was already waiting. And Seo Junwoo was already dead inside, until a boy no older than 3 barreled into his legs, looked up with his own face staring back at him in miniature, and said the one word that shattered everything. Dad. The lobby chandelier threw gold light across marble floors slick with rain someone had tracked in. Seo Junwoo straightened his cufflinks with hands that would not stop shaking, and told himself it was nerves, not grief. 6 hours from now he would marry a woman chosen by boardrooms, not by his heart. Then a small voice cracked through the noise like a gunshot. Dad. And a boy launched himself across the lobby, and Junwoo's entire carefully constructed life came apart at the seams. Welcome to Afro-Korea TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. Junwoo caught the boy on instinct, arms closing around a small warm body before his mind caught up to what was happening. The child smelled like rain and baby shampoo, and when he pulled back to look at the small face grinning up at him, his stomach dropped through the floor. The eyes. His mother's eyes, set in his own face, staring back at him like a photograph he'd never taken. Minjuna. A woman's voice, breathless, panicked, achingly familiar. He looked up, and the marble floor tilted beneath him. Linda. 3 years older. Thinner in the face, fuller in the way she held herself, like a woman who had learned to brace for impact and never fully unbraced again. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a hasty knot, and 2 more boys stood behind her, twins by the look of them, maybe 5 years old, watching the scene with wide, wary eyes. I'm so sorry, Linda said to Junwoo, not looking at his face, reaching for the child in his arms. He runs to any man in a suit, he doesn't. Minjun, come here, baby, that's not. Linda. Her name came out of him like something torn loose. She froze. Her eyes finally rose to meet his, and he watched 3 years of careful composure crumble in real time. Junwoo. The boy in his arms, Minjun, she'd called him, patted Junwoo's cheek with a small hand and said it again, with total, devastating certainty. Dad. The lobby seemed to hold its breath around them. Somewhere behind Junwoo, his assistant Mrs. Han had gone very still, phone forgotten in her hand. He calls every tall man that, Linda said quickly, too quickly, reaching for Minjun again. Kids do that, they don't know. Linda. Junwoo did not hand the boy over. He could not make his arms move. How old is he? Her jaw worked. The twins pressed closer to her legs, sensing the tension without understanding it. Junwoo, please, not here. How old? 2. Her voice broke on the word. He's 2. He did the math the way a man defuses a bomb. Carefully and already knowing it would go off. 2 years old. 3 years since she'd disappeared from his life without a word, without a note, without a single call he hadn't paid a private investigator a fortune trying to trace. He looked down at the boy in his arms, at his own eyes looking back at him, and felt the floor of his world give way entirely. He's mine. It wasn't a question. Linda didn't answer it as one. Not here, she whispered, and for the first time he saw real fear in her face. Not of him, he realized, but of everyone watching. Of Mrs. Han's phone. Of the wedding planner, who just rounded the corner with a clipboard and stopped dead at the sight of her boss holding a strange child. Of the entire glittering machine of Junwoo's life, which did not have room in it for a woman who'd vanished and a son nobody knew existed. A few hours earlier, none of them could have imagined this collision. Junwoo had been in his penthouse, staring at a tuxedo he felt nothing for, remembering, as he always did lately, a woman with a laugh like sunlight who used to burn rice on purpose because she said it was funnier than getting it right. He had built CO Group into an empire in the 3 years since she left, had let his mother arrange a merger disguised as a marriage, had told himself love was a luxury men like him couldn't afford twice. Then, he had walked into this lobby to greet wedding guests and walked straight into the one thing his money had never been able to buy back. Part 2. The Truth. In a private lounge off the lobby, the door closed against the chaos outside. The twins settled quietly into a corner with hotel stationery and crayons Mrs. Han had produced from somewhere, and Minjun asleep against Junwoo's shoulder, like he had always belonged there. Linda finally told him everything. "I found out 2 weeks after I left," she said, arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the carpet because she could not yet look at him directly. "I didn't even know at first. I thought I was sick from the stress of it all. The photographs, the accusations, your mother's lawyers threatening me at 3 in the morning. Then, I wasn't sick. I was pregnant. You should have told me. I tried." Her voice cracked. "Junwoo, I called your number so many times it stopped ringing at all. It just went straight to some corporate voicemail that told me to contact the office. I wrote letters. 3 of them that first year. They all came back unopened, marked return to sender in handwriting that wasn't yours." Junwoo felt something cold and furious settle behind his ribs. He already knew, with sick certainty, whose handwriting that was. "I thought you didn't want them back," Linda went on, voice unsteady. "I thought, maybe you believed the story the tabloids ran, that I'd taken money to disappear, so your family could arrange a better match. I thought if I came back with a baby, it would only prove what everyone already believed about me, that I was after your money. So I ran further. I had the twins first, a surprise, even to me. I swear I nearly fainted at the ultrasound, and then Minjun 18 months later. 3 boys. Alone. In a city where I knew no one, doing 3 jobs at once so they'd never go without anything." 3 years, Junwoo said, and his voice did not sound like his own. 3 years you carried this alone because my mother stole your letters." Linda's head came up sharply. "Your mother? I will explain everything," Junwoo said, jaw tight. "But first, Linda, look at me." She did, finally, and the raw grief in her eyes nearly undid him completely. "I searched for you. Every private investigator my money could hire. Every city you might have gone to. I told myself if I ever found you, I would beg you to come home, whatever it cost me, whatever I had to give up. And then I stopped believing I ever would, and I let my mother talk me into a marriage I felt nothing for, because I thought the only woman I would ever love had chosen to erase me from her life." "I never wanted to erase you," Linda whispered. "I just didn't think I had a right to fight for you anymore." That night, after the wedding planner had been sent away with vague instructions and a very large severance check, after Mrs. Han had sworn silence with the particular ferocity of a woman who had disliked the bride-to-be from the very first meeting, Junwoo sat on the floor of the private lounge with 3 sleeping boys arranged around him like he'd been building a fortress out of his own children, without realizing it. Linda watched him from the doorway, exhaustion and disbelief warring across her face. "You're really not marrying her," she said. "Not quite a question." "I was never going to marry her," Junwoo said quietly. "I was going to disappear into a life I didn't want because I thought the one I did want was gone forever." The following morning, the story broke anyway. Someone always talked. By 9 a.m., CO Group stock had dipped 2 points on rumor alone. Gossip sites were running grainy photos of the CEO carrying a strange child through a hotel lobby hours before his own wedding, and Junwoo's mother arrived at his penthouse like a storm front given human shape, her fury barely leashed behind a composed face. "You will fix this," she said, not bothering to sit. "You will issue a statement. You will go through with the wedding as scheduled, and you will quietly settle whatever that woman wants to make her disappear again. Something in Junwoo went very still and very cold. She is not a problem to be settled, Amma. She is the mother of my sons. His mother's eyes flicked, almost imperceptibly, toward the closed nursery door. The one Junwoo had a housekeeper hastily furnish overnight with borrowed cribs and a small mountain of toys bought at 4 a.m. by a security team, given no explanation beyond whatever they need. Now. Sons, she repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. 3 of them. Junwoo's voice dropped, dangerous in a way he rarely allowed it to be with her. Grandsons you hid from yourself for 3 years, because you intercepted her letters and let me believe she abandoned me for money. The color drained slowly from his mother's face. I did what was necessary to protect this family's reputation. You nearly destroyed this family, Junwoo said. There is no version of this conversation, Amma, where you convince me that was protection. For a long moment, his mother said nothing at all. Then, in a voice smaller than he'd heard from her in 20 years, she asked, "What do they look like?" Junwoo studied her face for any sign of manipulation and found, to his own surprise, something closer to genuine, frightened curiosity. He walked to the nursery door and opened it a crack, just enough for her to see 3 small shapes breathing evenly in borrowed cribs. Minjun's small fist curled beside his cheek exactly the way Junwoo's own had as a child, according to the one photograph that existed of him at that age. His mother made a sound like something breaking quietly inside her chest. I am not forgiving what you did, Junwoo said, but you will have the chance to know them. If you can prove to me and to Linda that you understand what it cost. That afternoon, at a small service department across the city where Linda had been staying with the boys before everything unraveled, a different kind of danger arrived. The jilted bride's father, a shipping magnate named Ha Sung-tae, a man whose company had weathered more than one cargo dispute settled by methods his industry preferred not to discuss, sent a representative to have a conversation with the woman causing the CEO trouble. The man in the dark suit was polite in the way that made politeness itself a threat. He asked the building's doorman for Linda's apartment number, and when the doorman, under instructions Junwoo had issued that very morning, refused to give it, the man's smile thinned into something with no warmth in it at all. Tell her, he said, that some problems are easier to solve quietly, before they become public embarrassments for everyone involved. The doorman called Junwoo's private line the moment the man was gone. Junwoo arrived within the hour, fury banked into something lethal and perfectly controlled, the kind of stillness that had made boardroom rivals go quiet mid-sentence more than once. He found Linda white-faced behind a locked door, the twins hidden in the bedroom at her instruction, Minjun clutched so tightly to her chest that the toddler had started to fuss at the pressure. I don't want anything from anyone, she said the moment she saw him, voice shaking. I never wanted money, I never wanted a scandal, I just wanted my son safe. I should never have let anyone see me at that hotel. Linda. Junwoo crossed the room in 3 strides and folded all 4 of them, Linda included, and she let him, which told him more in that instant than words could have, into the circle of his arms. They are safe. I promise you, whatever it costs, whoever I have to burn down to prove it. You will never run again because you're afraid. Not from me, not from Ha Sung-tae, not from anyone. That evening, Junwoo moved them into his penthouse under round-the-clock security, a decision Linda resisted for exactly 4 minutes before Minjun's small hand fisted in his father's shirt and refused to let go, and her protest died somewhere in her throat. A few days later, at a hastily reorganized company gala Junwoo could not politely cancel without inviting more speculation than the scandal had already caused. Linda stood at the edge of the ballroom in a borrowed dress that fit her like it had been made for her, hyper-aware of every eye that turned her way, some curious, some cruel, all of them calculating. A junior executive named Park Tae-min, ambitious and entirely too aware of his own charm, appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne and a smile that lingered a beat too long. You must be the mystery everyone's whispering about, he said, offering a glass. 3 sons and a CEO's undivided attention. I have to say I'm impressed. I'm not interested in being impressive, Linda said coolly, not taking the drink. No. Taemin leaned a fraction closer, the kind of practiced closeness that assumed permission it hadn't been given. Then what are you interested in? Across the ballroom, Junwoo had been mid-conversation with a board member when his attention snagged on the sight of another man leaning into Linda's space, and something ancient and possessive rose in his chest before he'd consciously decided to move. He crossed the floor without excusing himself, and the board member trailed off mid-sentence, forgotten. Taemin. Junwoo's voice was pleasant in the exact way that made every person nearby instinctively step back. I don't believe you've been introduced properly. This is Linda, the mother of my sons. A pause, precisely timed. And very soon, my wife. Linda's breath caught. It was the first time he'd said it aloud, to anyone in public, but she kept her face composed, some instinct telling her this moment belonged to him. Taemin's easy smile faltered. Of course. My apologies. I didn't realize. You didn't ask, Junwoo said, and there was nothing pleasant left in his voice at all. In future, don't assume a woman's availability simply because you find her beautiful. Especially not this one. When Taemin had retreated, red-faced, into the crowd, Linda turned to Junwoo with something caught between exasperation and a smile she couldn't quite suppress. Very soon, your wife. Was I wrong? He asked, and the vulnerability underneath the arrogance was so plain, so unguarded, that Linda's chest ached with it. No, she said softly. You weren't wrong. He didn't kiss her there, in front of 100 watching eyes. Some tenderness, he decided long ago, belonged only to the two of them. But he took her hand and held it through the rest of the evening like he intended never again to let it go, and the warmth of his palm against hers said everything a kiss might have. That night, back at the penthouse, with the boys finally asleep and the city glittering silent beyond the windows, the tension between them that had been building for 3 years and one impossible day finally found nowhere left to hide. I used to imagine this, Linda admitted quietly, standing at the window with her arms wrapped around herself. Coming back. Seeing you again. In every version I ever let myself imagine, you hated me for leaving. I could never hate you. Junwoo came to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him, not quite touching. I spent 3 years angry at everyone but you. My mother, myself, for not fighting harder to find you sooner. I never once managed to be angry at you, Linda, no matter how hard I tried. She turned to face him, and the careful distance either of them might have maintained dissolved in an instant. I was so afraid, she whispered, that if I ever saw you again, you'd look at me and see everything I ran from instead of everything I built to protect them. I look at you, Junwoo said, voice rough, and I see the bravest person I have ever known. The kiss that followed had 3 years of longing behind it, careful and devastating all at once, and when it broke, both of them were breathless, foreheads pressed together, the space between them finally, achingly closed. Stay, Junwoo murmured. Not because of the boys. Not because of the scandal or my mother or anything else in the city that thinks it has a say in what happens next between us. Stay because I am asking you to. What followed was not spoken of afterward in words, only in the way morning light found them tangled together at dawn, in the unhurried tenderness of hands that had waited 3 years to hold each other again, in breathless silences that said more than either of them trusted themselves to voice aloud. It was fire-banked low and burning steady, longing finally allowed to become something more, closeness that asked for nothing except to be believed in. The next morning, Linda woke before dawn with panic clawing up her throat. She had let herself want this too easily. Too fast. What if, in the cold light of day, Junwoo looked at her differently, regretted the vulnerability of the night before, resented the family that had been thrust upon him without his choosing, decided that a woman who had run once could never fully be trusted not to run again. By the time the sun was fully up, she had dressed the boys, packed a single bag, and was standing in the penthouse foyer with Minjun on her hip and the twins clutching her hands, security guards staring at her in confused alarm, when Junwoo emerged from the bedroom and found the apartment half empty of the family that had filled it only hours before. Linda. Her name came out sharp with fear. Where are you going? I can't do this, she said, not turning around, voice thick. I can't let myself believe in this and then lose it again. It's easier if I leave now before. Before what? Junwoo crossed the foyer and stepped in front of her, forcing her to either stop or walk through him. Before I have the chance to prove I meant every word I said last night? Before you wake up and realize what you actually signed up for, Linda said, tears finally spilling over. A wife with baggage. 3 children who aren't part of some perfect boardroom arranged life. A scandal that will follow you for years. Linda. Junwoo's voice cracked with something raw and furious and desperate all at once. He reached out and gently took Minjun from her arms. The boy went easily, already trusting him completely, and then took both her hands in his free one. I have spent 3 years building an empire I did not want, marrying myself to work because I believed the only thing I actually wanted was gone forever. You are not baggage. You are the only thing in my entire life that has ever felt like it was actually mine, chosen freely, not arranged by anyone else's ambition. If you walk out that door, I will follow you. I will follow you to whatever city you run to next, and I will keep following you, because I already lost you once for 3 years I will never get back, and I refuse to lose you again out of your fear instead of my failure. Linda stood frozen, tears streaming freely now, the twins looking between their parents with wide, uncertain eyes. Stay, Junwoo said again, softer now. Please. Slowly, the tension went out of her shoulders. She nodded, once, and let him pull her and all 3 boys back into the circle of his arms. By the end of that week, Ha Sung-tae, having failed to intimidate Linda into disappearing quietly, escalated in a way none of them anticipated. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Linda had taken the boys to a small private park attached to the penthouse building, security trailing at a respectful distance, when a black van pulled up at the Park Service entrance and 2 men in unmarked jackets moved with purpose toward the play structure where the twins were climbing. The lead security guard clocked the threat half a second before it happened, shouted a warning and lunged, but not before one of the men had gotten close enough to grab for Minjun, who shrieked in terror. Linda threw herself between the man and her son with a ferocity that startled even her own bodyguards, clawing and screaming, buying just enough time for the second guard to tackle the assailant to the ground. By the time Junwoo arrived, having dropped everything, abandoned a board meeting mid-sentence the moment his phone lit up with the alert, both men had been subdued and were being held for police, but Linda was shaking uncontrollably, Minjun sobbing into her shoulder, the twins clinging to her legs in matching terror. They tried to take him, she gasped, when Junwoo reached her. They tried to take my baby. Junwoo's fury, when it finally surfaced, was the coldest thing Linda had ever witnessed in him. He gathered all 4 of them into a waiting car with his own hands shaking with barely restrained rage, and by that evening, Ha Sung-tae found himself facing not just criminal charges for attempted kidnapping but the full, ruinous weight of CO Group's legal and financial machinery turned against every shipping contract, every port license, every business relationship his company depended on. You will lose everything, Junwoo told him directly. In a meeting Ha Sung-tae's lawyers had begged him to avoid, and he'd insisted on attending anyway. Your company, your reputation, possibly your freedom, once the kidnapping charges are finished with you. You made the mistake of believing my family was a liability to be quietly removed. You are about to learn what it costs to threaten what I love. In the days that followed, with Ha Sung-tae's threat neutralized and the story of the failed kidnapping, mercifully kept from the press, at considerable expense, fading into private memory, Junwoo's mother arrived at the penthouse unannounced, carrying, to Linda's utter shock, a small, carefully wrapped gift for each of the boys. I am not asking forgiveness, she said stiffly, standing in the doorway like a woman uncertain of her welcome. I know I do not deserve it easily, if at all. I am asking for the chance to be present, to know them, to be, in time, something more to them than the grandmother who nearly cost them their father. Linda studied her for a long moment, feeling the ghost of 3 exhausting, lonely years pressing against her chest. Then Minjun, entirely unaware of the weight of the moment, toddled forward and tugged curiously at the ribbon on his gift, and something in the older woman's carefully composed face cracked open with naked, startled tenderness. "Come in," Linda said finally.
Slowly.
"We'll see." It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a door left open instead of closed, and Junwoo, watching from across the room, felt something in his chest ease for the first time in 3 years. A month later, on the penthouse terrace overlooking a city painted gold and rose by the setting sun, with the twins racing each other around the garden furniture and Minjun dozing against his mother's shoulder, Junwoo knelt in front of Linda the way he had meant to 3 years and 1 stolen letter ago. "I'm not the man I was when you left," he said, voice steady despite the way his hands trembled around the small box he produced from his jacket. "I'm angrier now, more careful. I trust almost no one outside this family. But I have never, not for a single day in 3 years, stopped loving you. Marry me, Linda. Let me be the father I should have been from the very beginning. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for every year I couldn't." Linda was crying before he finished speaking, laughter and tears tangled together, and the twins had abandoned their game entirely to watch, wide-eyed, sensing that something enormous was happening in the golden light around them. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Junwoo. 1,000 times yes." Minjun, startled awake by his mother's sudden movement, blinked blearily up at the scene, patted his father's cheek with one small hand, and said, with the same total, devastating certainty he'd shown in a hotel lobby a month before, "Dad." This time, it didn't shatter anything. This time, it built something whole. 6 months later, in a small ceremony with no press credentials, no boardroom politics disguised as celebration, and no one present but the people who genuinely loved them, Seo Junwoo married the woman he had once nearly lost forever. 3 small boys stood at the altar in matching tiny suits, Minjun clutching his father's leg through the entirety of the vows and refusing, with great 2-year-old solemnity, to let go even when the officiant gently suggested it might be time. Junwoo's mother sat in the front row beside a grandmother's proud, careful smile, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief she pretended not to need. When Junwoo lifted Linda's veil and looked at her, really looked at her, the way he'd looked at her the very first time they'd met, before scandal and separation and 3 stolen years had ever come between them, he felt something settle permanently into place in his chest. "I told you I'd never stop looking for you," he murmured, just for her. "I told myself I didn't deserve to be found," she whispered back. "You proved me wrong." He kissed her then, soft and certain, while their sons cheered without understanding exactly why, and somewhere in the small crowd, his mother finally let herself cry without shaving. The following spring, in a quiet delivery room lit soft with early morning light, Linda placed a newborn daughter into Junwoo's arms for the very first time, a 4th child, this one born not of secrecy and fear but of a love that had finally, fully, been allowed to breathe. Junwoo looked down at his daughter's tiny face, then up at his wife, exhausted and radiant in the hospital bed, then at the 3 boys crowded eagerly around them, jostling for the best view of their new sister, and understood, fully, finally, in a way no boardroom victory or business empire had ever managed to teach him, that everything he had built meant nothing next to this. A wife who had run from fear and stayed, in the end, for love. For children who would never, not for a single day of their lives, have to wonder if their father was coming back for them. He already had. And he was never leaving again.